my name is Trail. I've been working on a custom Deadpool cosplay, and today I'm going to show you how to make a classic comic book style pair of superhero shoes out of some old slip-on dress shoes from the thrift store. The first step is to make our fabric cover. Start by tracing the outline of your foot for the bottom piece of the pattern. For the next piece, measure across the top of your foot and from your toe to the top of where you want the shoe to end. Using the first shape, trace a U-shaped piece with the width and length you just measured. Try to keep a uniform width along this whole piece, but check to make sure it covers the top of your foot while only going halfway around your ankle. For the back piece, measure at your heel from the floor to the same top point. Make it a similar width at the top, but flare out the bottom so that it comes forward to meet up with that top piece. Cut out your paper templates. I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the top and back pieces, but not on the sole. This is because I want the bottom of the fabric to pull tight over the shoe later in the process. Then, cut your pieces out of a light stretch fabric. In this case, I'm using a bullet textured stretch Liverpool, which is the same fabric as the rest of my costume. Since you're likely going to make a matching pair, I recommend folding the fabric over so that you cut through 2 layers at the same time. This way, you have both of the pieces that you need and can save yourself some extra cutting. Now we're ready to start sewing our sock together. On my sewing machine, I'm using a number 4 stitch, which is a narrow zigzag that will give us some stretch with normal thread, while still acting like a straight stitch. Start with one of the ankle seams. All of these seams are going to be a double top stitch. Start with a normal seam, then press the seam allowances open and top stitch over each side. When you're done, you'll have something like this. Pin the other ankle seam, but don't sew it yet. This will be a zipper later. Pin the sole in place and then stitch it to the top and back. Then, flip the sock right side out and complete the top stitch. After that, sew the second ankle seam for about 1 inch from the bottom, but don't top stitch it yet. Then, hem the top edge of the sock. Once you have your hem, switch to a zipper foot and a regular straight stitch, and install an invisible zipper in the open ankle seam. Invisible zippers are tricky to properly explain, and I'll make another video about that later, but depending on how you sew it, you'll already have that double top stitched look. I used an 8-inch zipper and ended up trimming it short, using a dab of super glue to keep it from opening at the bottom. Finally, flip the sock inside out and trim all of the seams to remove any excess bulk. Now we can move on to the shoe itself. The technique I'm using here is based off of what the costumers did for the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man suit. Start by removing the outer sole of the shoe. This is easily going to be the hardest part. I mostly used Barge all-purpose thinner with a little help from my heat gun and X-Acto knife, but I had to twist and yank the crap out of it. But eventually it came off in one piece. Keep in mind, if you buy a cheaper, modern pair of shoes, the foam sole might not come off as easily. Once everything is removed from the bottom, slide the sock over the shoe. Then, slowly cut a small slit in the middle of the sock until you can just line up the seam with the bottom edge of the shoe. Now, carefully holding the sock in place, use several small spots of super glue to attach the fabric, starting under the edge of the slit, and then eventually just soaking through the fabric closer to the outer edge. Once the fabric sock is secure, cover the bottom with some stick-on rubber sole grips. You can find these on Amazon in several different colors, and I chose to match the fabric with red ones. Stick them to the sole and trim them to fit. Depending on the size of your shoes, you may need to puzzle piece them a bit, but 4 square pieces should easily cover a full pair of shoes. The adhesive on these grips isn't the best, so to make absolutely sure that it wouldn't come off, I went back around the whole shoe and super glued the edges down over the fabric. If all you're looking for is some plain superhero boots or superhero shoes, then you can stop here. But for the Deadpool look, we're going to move on to the ankle cuff. For the cuff, we're going to use EVA craft foam. Cut a 2-inch wide strip out of 5mm foam long enough to comfortably wrap around your ankle. Then, cut 2 1/2-inch wide strips slightly longer than the big strip out of 2mm foam. I'm using a rotary tool to shape down some of the edges on the bigger piece so that it doesn't look like flat craft foam. Use a heat gun to form a curve in the cuff, then glue the strips down to the 5mm piece with contact cement, about 1/4 inch apart at the center line. If you glue the pieces together while curved, this will help it hold that final shape. For this design, the buckles are just detail pieces and don't have to be functional. I cut 2 small trapezoids out of 2mm foam and glued them to the smaller strips right in the middle of the cuff. Then, I made a flap out of 2mm foam and glued it to the back of the cuff. This gave me a platform that I could glue pieces of Velcro onto and secure from the inside so that the straps wouldn't be visible on the outside of the cuff. I gave the whole cuff one more pass with a heat gun to seal the surface and get it ready for Plasti-Dip priming. Go slow and use light, even layers. I go for at least 2 full coats, and in this case, I'm leaving the Plasti-Dip as the final finish, so it doesn't hurt to use a little extra. Once the Plasti-Dip was dry, I went back and used silver rub and buff on the 2 buckle pieces. This is kind of a small detail, but one of the things that I like about rub and buff is that once it's dried, you can buff it out and shine it to make it look a little more metallic. Finally, it's time to glue the cuff to the shoe. Make sure to test your fit before you commit to this part. Get 1 good coat of contact cement about halfway around the top edge of the sock, 1 inch wide. Then, do the same to the top edge of the inside of the cuff. Leave a gap for the Velcro to open, and make sure you can get to the zipper. Once the glue is dry, line up your edges and stick them together. I also went in with a couple dots of super glue to make sure the edges wouldn't lift as I wore the shoes. Alright, so there we go. That is the finished Deadpool superhero shoe. This one is specifically based off of the original 90s character introduction. I wanted to have that option for the cosplay that I'm wearing, but I wanted it to be kind of modular, so I've actually got some different options with it, including this shoe that I made using a different base, slightly different cuffs, and based on the late 90s, early 2000s run of the character. So if you want to see how to make this shoe, stick around. I'll have a tutorial ready for that one here in about a week or 2. If you're not watching this video when it's just come out, there's probably a link to it somewhere up on the screen right about now. But this one is just as interesting, just as comfortable. In some ways, I actually kind of like the way that it looks less like a normal shoe, and the cuffs work differently. So if you want a different option for how to put these cuffs together, that'll be in the next tutorial. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you got some good use out of it. Leave a comment down below if you're planning on using this for one of your own cosplays. I'd love to see a picture of it if you make something, whether that's another Deadpool or if you use it for a different character. If you did enjoy this video, please go ahead and leave a like. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of these tutorials. It really does help out. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.